Yep.
We're good? Okay. Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Poison Pen Bookstore. Today is Tuesday, September 18th, right? I always get those basics wrong. And we're here with Farrel Coleman, who has just published, this is the fifth.
The fifth that I've written.
In your Jesse Stone series.
Yes.
And wow, this is an absolute killer of a book. Very, very, very timely too. Fortunately, I should say. And let's see, where's a good place to begin? I mean, what's going on with Jesse? He's just gotten out of Rita.
Yeah, Jesse. That's an interesting. Jesse, you know, I'm not really allowed by the estate to change Jesse's character, but this is the 17th book in the series. The fifth written by me, but it's the 17th book in the series. 9 written by Bob Parker, 3 written by Michael Brandon, and 5 written by me. And 17 books. I can do that. That much math I can do. Beyond that, I'm in big trouble. I wrote a 9-book series, you know, the Mo Prager series. And what happens with series is, unless you name Lee Child, what happens in a series, and I'm sure Michael Connolly would even say this, you need books where you change some stuff up. I get very tired of dragging my protagonists over the same hot coals, you know, for even 5 books. And the hot coals Jesse got dragged over for 5 books was drinking.
Yeah.
Actually, it was 17 books. Jesse has been drunk, basically, for 17 books. And for a few reasons, I thought it was time to change that. One, I don't think readers anymore, mystery readers, have the love and the romance for the drunk protagonist that they used to. I don't think, you know, where it was the tough, hard-drinking, white guy, irresistible to women, you know, that kind of conceit. I don't think people love that anymore.
Yeah, you never see him crap in his pants or waking up and throwing up.
Right. Yeah, I think the reality of drinking too much is a lot different than what is usually portrayed in books. But I think people have gotten wise to that, and I don't think people are as fond as you know, that stereotype. And so I thought enough of his drinking, and I was tired of it. I was tired of writing those scenes over and over again.
Kind of the ritual of it all.
Right. First it would be the drinking, and then it would be Jesse thinking about drinking, and then it would be the ritual of the drinking, and then it would be Jesse having the hangover from the drinking. And this became such a big part of the books that I started to get really tired of it, and I can only assume that the readers, some I'm sure love it, but
It's going to take its toll on it physically too over the years.
Right. And so I set up a few books ago, him kind of hitting bottom. Something happened that would make him hit rock bottom. The death of his fiancée, the murder of his fiancée. Right. So in the interim book, so in Debt to Pay, his fiancée is murdered right in front of him, and he blames himself for it. In the Hangman's Sonnet, he's living out the guilt of feeling responsible for it, and drinks a ridiculous amount. And in that book, the 2 women he loves and respects most, the medical examiner Tamara Elkin and Molly, go to him and say, enough is enough. Your drinking is selfish, you're going to kill yourself, and we're not enabling you anymore. And Jesse at his core is somebody all about doing the right thing. And so it's very consistent with Jesse's character to do the right thing once he knows it's the right thing. And so when Tamara and Molly, the 2 women he loves and respects most in the world, come to him and say, you're being selfish and you're killing yourself, and we're not going to help anymore, realizes the right thing to do for everybody, and especially himself, is to go to rehab and stop drinking. So now Jesse's been to rehab, and he comes back to paradise. But I think in no other of the Jesse Stone books is the term paradise been more ironic than in this book, because in this book it's anything but paradise. So Jesse comes back to town. He's, off balance because he's gone from a man struggling with drinking to a man struggling with not drinking, and those are two very different things. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't aspire to be one, but I know some, and I've spoken to drug counselors about it, and so he's a little off balance now. The struggle is now he's not going to drink. He's determined not to drink. In the past, he's not drunk. You've read the book, so in the past, he's had bouts of not drinking, but it was like holding a kid holding his breath, right? The kid's gonna breathe eventually, unless you're holding him around the throat. So the kid's gonna breathe, and Jesse's not drinking in the past was always that. He knew he'd drink again.
He's not a real joiner, so the whole reaching out for help is very awkward and difficult for him at first.
Yeah, he's just, as Molly, I think the best description of him ever was by Molly, who said he's very self-contained. So some people call that a loner, but Molly's description of him is self-contained. He doesn't really need, or he doesn't seem to need, anybody else. Of course he does, but he doesn't seem to need anybody else. So it is hard, but he finally does it. He gets through it. Now he's going to AA meetings, which was fun. It adds to the series. You know why? It's like I said, it's a change novel. Now I've introduced new characters that weren't in the previous books. Bill and Anya, right? So now there are people in the books who weren't in the books in the past.
Well, it's funny because, and I think it's a very common kind of reaction, is that he's a very public figure in this small community, and so he doesn't want to go to a 12-step meeting in paradise.
Right.
He has to go to Boston, where nobody knows him.
Right. And when you see, he goes to an Episcopal church that used to be across the street from Diane's old apartment. So in a way, he's reminding himself of why he's even there and why he stopped drinking, and he has fond memories of her. So I can never do anything just cheery. So
that's why I like your book so much. But there's the timely aspect of it. There's a lot of
yeah. So you know what? Can I read the first page?
Absolutely.
All right. So you'll have to pardon me because I'm going to be. This is a little awkward. No. I should be fine.
Can Virginia hold the mic?
Yeah. No. Well, first thing I want to do
Might
is
not be very good at that.
one thing I've tried really hard to do on this tour is to point out things that readers skip over all the time. So I just want to point out who the book is dedicated to. It's dedicated to Ace Atkins and my friend Tom Schreck. Everybody knows Ace, but you probably don't know Tom. Tom is a New York writer, he's from upstate New York, Albany. That most New York people like Brian and I consider Albany a different state. It's like past Westchester County, New Yorkers consider upstate. Like there's nothing between Westchester and Canada. There's land and lakes.
Those William Kennedy novels. Wow.
Yeah,
Albany Cycle.
And Albany is much like that.
Yeah.
So you all know Ace, and Ace was why this book is dedicated to Ace and Tom is they are the people I spoke to first when I got this job. Ace, for obvious reasons, he wrote Spencer before I got this job, so he knew what it was like dealing with the estate and what it would be like for me and how my life would change. And Tom series because Tom's a huge Parker fan, and he'd read everything Parker ever wrote. And so I said to him, I said yes. When they offered me this job, I said yes. It didn't take me long to think about it. I mean, would you like to write a series, that was started by the Dean of American Detective Fiction with an iconic character played by Tom Selleck? Do you want to do that? Nah.
We do like hundreds of thousands of new readers.
Right. No, I don't. Who wants to do that? Oh, okay, I'll do it. So, but then you say yes, and then you have to figure out how you're going to write the books. So Tom actually was the person who determined how I'd write the books. Because Tom said to me, Reed, I'm the hugest Elvis Presley fan in the world. And I said, Tom, I'm not talking about becoming Elvis Presley. He said it relates. He said, I've seen the greatest Elvis impersonators there are, but there's two things that you can never escape. No matter how good they are, we know it's not Elvis. And the impersonators, no matter how good they are, can never do anything new. So when he said that to me, it is the best piece of advice I ever got, because what he was telling me is, don't try to imitate what Bob Parker did, because it would always be seen as imitation. And I would never be able to sustain trying to write like Bob. So that's why the book's dedicated to Tom and Ace. Plus I wanted to curry favor with both of them. And the second thing most people skip is the epigraph or the epigram, the opening quote. My writers spend hours and days finding the opening quote. They really do. They spend, they sweat.
Do you have a bunch of them written down? That one occurs to you?
No, Google is a magical thing. For me it's usually easier than for most writers because I studied poetry, and writers often use poetry, lines from famous poems. And this actually is from a poet. The opening quote is not flesh and blood, but heart which makes us fathers and sons, by Schiller. Now, some of you may know who Schiller is, and most of you don't. But you actually have heard Schiller's poet. He's a German poet from the 18th century, I believe. So you know Beethoven, right? You've heard of this guy Beethoven. So if you've listened to the Ninth Symphony and that Fremde Schöne Gatte Funken Takta, außer Lies, the Ode to Joy, that's Schiller. Beethoven didn't write so it was like Lennon and McCartney. Beethoven and Schiller.
Casino source.
Yeah, they're now starring in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
They do 2 shows a night. Try the veal, ladies and gentlemen. So I've gone this is my last tour date out of New York. So this is my 5th city in 5 days. So if I sound a little wacky and tangential, I have good reason.
We'll encourage it.
Yes, please do. So here's the first page, and this will change the mood. I guarantee it. She thought she might pass out from the ache in her side, or that her heart might explode in her chest as she ran barefoot along the dunes. Her beautiful long beaded braids, of which she was rightfully proud, slapped against her shoulders, her face, and fell in front of her eyes. She stopped, trying to catch her breath and to listen for them, for their heavy footfalls, but the low roar of the waves swallowed up all the sounds of the night, much as they had overwhelmed her cries for help. Too tired to think, she bent over at the waist, sucking in huge gulps of crisp sea air. Her throat was raw from screaming. Sweat rolled down her forehead, stinging her eyes. It covered her dark black skin and soaked through her sports bra, panties, and torn warm-up pants. As her wind returned to her, and the stitch in her side subsided, say that 5 times fast. She felt the burn of her sweat seeping into the nicks and cuts around her ankles, caused by the brambles and sharp dune grasses. Her jaw was throbbing from where one of them had smashed his fist into her face. As she pressed her fingers to the swelling, the absurdity of the situation rushed back in like the waves on the beach below. This can't be happening to me. things like this happen to other women. So that's the cheery opening of the book, but it introduces the theme of the book, which is race relations. Jesse comes back to town. He's, unsteady because he's just come through rehab, and there's a whole series of racially motivated crimes in Paradise and in the towns around Paradise. Plus, there's a new kid in town whose goal in life, it seems to be a thorn in Jesse Stone's side. He's got a chip on his shoulder the size of Phoenix, and it's all aimed right at Jesse Stone. So this is what he's dealing with. Now, people have been good. They haven't accused me from the headlines, but I have to say that I turned this book in a month before Charlottesville.
Really?
Yeah, so this was just, I don't write message books. I'm not first of all, what I think is unimportant, right? It's not what the author thinks. And anytime an author, if you're conscious of the author has not done his or her job. I don't want you thinking that anyone wrote the book, right? You want people to get lost in the book. And the worst way for anybody to lose the reader is to stand up on a soapbox and preach at them. I hate books in which someone is preaching to me.
You see them from time to time too.
What?
You do see those books
Oh
from
yeah.
time to time too.
Look, Andrew Vox has one theme, right? And you know what the theme is.
Right.
Well, I mean, he's a very good writer.
Good writer, yeah.
But and the books are compelling, But he makes the story so interesting that the theme is not. He's not. At the end of the book what what he cares about. I'm not interested in putting forward a political agenda.
But it's unfortunately a revealing look at what's in the air right now.
Right. So I'll tell you what the genesis of this book was. There's a lot of, how many times have we heard this story? Male white police officer shoots unarmed black teenager, right? That's the broad stroke of it, right? Of course, every one of those incidents is different from them, but it's caused a division in the country, right? So, of course, writers always ask themselves questions, and what-if questions. So my what-if question that was the real genesis of this book is, what if I turn that around? What if an African-American female officer shot an unarmed white teenager? How would the groups align? Would Black Lives Matter align with the white teenager's parents? Would the Blue Lives Matter, who would they align with? So that's the genesis of this book. Not Reed Coleman getting up on a soapbox and preaching. And the book is about how does Jesse deal with this, thrust into the middle of this. Because once one of these incidents happened, no matter what the truth of the incident is, who's going to come into town, right? You're going to have the Al Sharpton crowd come into town, and the white supremacists come into. So all of a sudden, Paradise is not Paradise, and so that was the genesis of the book, but not me pushing an agenda forward.
Right. It's really interesting. I was wondering if you could talk about just about Jesse Stone as you have interpreted him. His whole approach to law enforcement in particular, I think, is very interesting. There's a really revealing scene. I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. Where he's talking about, don't book this guy.
Right.
Cut him loose.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, Jesse is all about doing right, but he's not blind. And we have at least two retired police officers here. My bodyguards, by the way. You know, I need security, and I think they'd be the first to tell you that sometimes you need to exercise discretion. It's your job is to uphold the law, but your job is also to understand where the line is sometimes, and to say, you know, yes, he's a jerk, he's being a jerk, but you know, because once you put someone in the system, right, they're in the system, and the system is not kind. The system is not, you know, it's like being fed into a machine. And I mean, I had an experience with this. My son, when he was 17, to show off for a girl, like, gee, I've never done that. There was a house in a park, in a state park on the island, in Lake Grove, Wisconsin. It's an abandoned house in the middle of the state park, and every kid in town has been in that house, right? My daughter was in that house. He went with a friend because he was showing off to this girl, and the neighbor who was sick of the people who lived on the border of the park called the police, and my son got arrested. And so, luckily he was under 18, and he just got an appearance warrant, but he was arrested and fingerprinted and mugshot, and the thought, he will never break the law again, I guarantee you that. But when I went, we had to go to court, right? And it was amazing to see, like, of course, his mother and his father came with him. He was in a suit, he was low, you know, he had his lawyer was an assistant DA's husband, right? Yeah, right. He had every advantage, but there were kids waiting to go before the judge who were dressed in jeans and T-shirts, whose legal aid lawyers had folders like piled this high, who'd never met their clients before. So Jesse understands the reality of that situation. You don't want to put people in the system unless you have to put them in the system.
Found it.
Okay, so, okay. Okay. Jesse smiled at her. I guess that's Molly. He knew he had been right to trust her with his job and his town. And the fact that she hadn't charged the kid only confirmed it. The PPD wasn't about arrests and statistics. It was about keeping the peace and doing right by the people. The truth was that putting someone into the system was a decision not to be made lightly. The justice system was overburdened, and it tended to grind up the people locked behind its bars. As far as Jesse could tell, very few people came out the other end of time in prison better citizens for the experience. It wasn't a popular attitude these days, but Jesse believed a good kick in the ass and a little understanding often worked better than time inside. So that's yeah. So I'm sure that you guys exercise that kind of discretion, and that's Jesse's idea. He's about doing right, but that not always according to the letter of the law. Right.
So while all this is going on, there are these series of incidents that happen. I don't want to give any spoilers,
right.
But there are, fairly early on in the book,
right.
a cross is burned on from somebody's lawn.
Yes.
And then all these, what's interesting, all these flyers that are appearing all over town.
Which Brian here, who used to live on Long Island, occasionally there'll be in Patchogue and in Medford, KKK flyers appear on people's. I mean, it happens everywhere. So I'm not, pointing a finger at any. It can happen any place, which is why Paradise was a good place to put it, because we live on Long Island, which people, he used to live on Long Island, I still do, where people we lived in the same county. I like to describe where we lived as in the same county as the Hamptons, but 1,000,000 miles away. So those flyers show up even where I live. And a few years ago, a cross was burned on somebody's lawn where I live. So it happens everywhere. And it's really shocking and disturbing when it happens.
Well, it's interesting because the flyers in this book that appear are very well written.
I wonder
comparatively.
I wonder how
comparatively
that
speaking.
happened.
Well, very intentionally on your part, you know,
Yes,
to make a good
because
point.
the guy, as a guys, the most effective kind of hate is the kind guys as not hate. We want to protect you.
Appealing to your
You're
fears.
appealing to your fears and anger, and if you state it well, it doesn't seem like that's what you're doing. So that's the idea of these flyers, and of course, some people it appeals to. So,
There's that whole insular,
well,
nature
let's
of-
say the nature of paradise is changing.
Right.
A few books ago, again, I had Vinnie Morris, who is the mafia guy from Boston, warns Jesse. You think paradise is safe from the kind of crime we have in Boston, but you're wrong. It's coming, and that's true of everywhere. I mean, did anybody watch the news today? A championship golfer, college student, playing golf in the morning on the golf course in Ames, Iowa, was stabbed to death in the middle of, she's from Spain, so she played for Iowa State. So big city crime, it's that hasn't happened in New York in a long time. Somebody getting stabbed to death on the golf course. If I play with my brother a few more times, he may get stabbed to death. But no, it's so the fact is that the belief that somehow you're safe, or if you live in this town, that can't happen here. It's false. It's a myth.
Yeah.
So Jesse had been warned this kind of thing could happen.
And it's the political climate that we're in. We don't want to get too much
Right.
into that, but it's out there. It seems to have given a lot of these kind of fringe groups more of a
And
forum.
Right.
Or,
Which I think is actually healthy. I'd rather see it in the open
yeah.
than to have it not be in the open. That's the joy. That's the beauty of free speech. This is me, not the author. I am a free speech absolutist, and I'm an anti-censorship absolutist, because I think for the Constitution to work, okay, this is me on the soapbox, I believe totally in free speech, because the idea of this is what was so genius about the founders of this country. Sometimes I don't think we appreciate this, but the founders of this country, as flawed as they were, slave owners that they were very intelligent people. The whole idea of free speech is, if it makes you uncomfortable, you have to examine it. Why does it make you uncomfortable? So it exposes idiots to the light, in other words. Or, it exposes idiots to the light. And I'm a Democrat, and I'm not ashamed to say that, and I think Democrats are fools when they try to suppress speech. I'm glad that this is out there, because when you operate under the false belief that this isn't there,
Right.
you're operating on without all the information. And maybe we needed this exposed to the light a little bit. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with people getting run over, but I'm okay with if there are Nazis here and they want to demonstrate. I'm not happy about it, but I don't believe in suppressing it.
Right.
So that's now I'm going to get off the soapbox.
I like, what was that great A.J. Liebling quote about the proper function of the press? What was it? It was to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. So that was a great line.
Yeah, I mean, So I believe me, the Constitution of this country is an amazing document, and we should pay more attention to it. It really is an amazing document. It is free speech is really, no, it doesn't mean free speech comes without a price. You know, nothing is free. So yeah, I can say anything I want, and it's good that I can say anything I want. That doesn't mean I can get away with saying anything. Then you have to be willing to pay the consequences.
Right.
That's what people don't understand about free speech. Is what you say comes with consequences.
You could get your ass kicked.
Oh yeah, especially in Brooklyn. for saying nothing.
Right.
So boy, we veered off into
That's okay.
interesting territory.
That's okay. There isn't a whole lot that we can really
Right.
say about
You
this.
should read the book. It's got
It's
a lot of surprises.
It's a
in it.
dynamite book,
And if things work out right, maybe it'll be on the bestseller list. I don't know. We'll see.
You alluded to the estate keeping you kind of planted in the character. How did you go about making the changes to Jesse and introducing new characters? 'Cause I know in prior discussions that's kind of, you've been pigeonholed a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Well,
how did that
that's
whole
okay.
process go?
You know, I think in some ways it's really good that the estate wants some consistency.
Yeah.
It's
Ace has made the same.
right.
you
Well,
know,
Ace and I talk about this
Yeah.
stuff. You know, when I killed Geno Fish, right, in one of the books, Ace and I had to discuss it. And when we thought it was okay, we had to go to our editor and ask her, and then she went to the agent for the estate and said, "Look, Ace and Reed want to do this. Is that okay?" And they said yes, because we operate in the same universe. You know,
who exactly is the estate now? Jones gone. Is it the Sons?
it's the Sons.
Okay.
And now the estate is represented by Esther Newberg, who's a famous New York agent.
I see.
I mean, you've both been very, very successful in the books that you've taken over and that you've written. So I have to assume that there's some comfort.
Yeah,
in
I think they're comfortable with us doing the books. But the reason there's comfort in us doing the books is because we know, I think we have a good sense of how far we can go, you know. Tom Shrek joked, now that you're taking over the series, you're going to have Jesse change his name from Jesse Stone to Jesse Stein. And, you know, because that's what Stein means in German, is stone. So come to think of this, Einstein, right? Right? One stone. Think of the Big Bang Theory. So Einstein's name means one stone. So just a tidbit for cocktail conversation.
Another kind of joke direction you go with it.
when you have a Johnny Walker Black Label in your hand.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's another thing. I always say people have two reactions to my writing, Jesse, right? One is, Reed must love Scotch, because the way he writes about Scotch, right? So fans give me expensive bottles of Scotch. I hate Scotch. I can't stand the way it smells. To me, it smells like a wet campfire. And the more expensive the Scotch, the less I like it. So, is there anybody here who likes Scotch?
No.
Like, there's one particular brand called Lagavulin, right? It's single malt Scotch. If someone's drinking it 10 feet away from me, I know they're drinking it. So, I was on tour, and I was in Memphis, and I was standing at the bar talking to a guy who, you know, like me, a guy who does a lot of traveling, and we're talking, and I smell that smell, and I turned to a guy like three people down from me. I said, "Is that Lagavulin?" And he said, "How did you know?" I said, "Because it smelled like somebody had a campfire and poured water over it, and that's what it smells like." He goes, "You know, that's what it smells like." So I hate Scotch. So one reaction is people give me expensive bottles of Scotch. The other is, how's your recovery going? You know?
That's a compliment.
Oh, I know. I take it as a compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Would you say that the books, I haven't read an awful lot of Parker, enough, but I read some of yours, and the books seem to me to be about, in a certain sense, about friendship, about long-term friendship sometimes over generations. And there are a lot of characters in this book, like Suit.
Right.
And some of the other-
Suit and Molly and
Molly.
Healy.
Yeah.
And now he has an uneasy friendship with Lundquist, who's taken over for Healy, because he's a younger cop. He's kind of he's more about doing it by the book than Healy was, and so it's kind of an uncomfortable friendship with him. They're friends, but it's not the same as that old comfortable friendship. And it's the books are about a lot of things. They're about somebody who believes in doing right. There's someone who's perpetually not from the place. He always thinks, okay, I know paradise. This is my town. And often he's hit in the face with something that tells him, no, it isn't. Molly is from paradise. Like Molly in this book has a little speech about, this is my town, this is where I'm from, and how
She gets
angry.
chief while all these
Right. And she's pretty angry about what's going on, and in a way that Jesse doesn't, because Jesse is from anybody? No, you know where Jesse's from? Tucson.
That's right.
Jesse's from Tucson.
I forgot that.
Yeah, he's from Tucson.
Yeah, it's plenty
So
from
yeah,
LA.
he's from Tucson. He played ball in let's see, where did he play ball? In New Mexico. Albuquerque. He was a cop in LA, and so he's a kind of rootless guy. He was also in the Marines. He was kind of a rootless guy. And so, although he's been in paradise for a long time, it's not his town.
Do we ever really know his age? Do you ever see?
No, yeah, that's another thing. It's Parker time.
Yeah.
Ace and I call it.
They
Parker
never
time.
age.
Yeah. Well,
Spencer
like
wasn't he like a
Spencer,
World War II
Spencer
vet?
was fought in the Korean War
Korean
and
War.
boxed Jersey Joe Walcott. And you want to ask Spencer, was Lincoln enjoying the play? So, but just like Harry Bosch, right? You realize in the books, Harry Bosch was a tunnel rat in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And now in the television series, which I think is great, by the way.
Yeah.
And I tell Michael that every time I see him in the hopes that he'll give me a bit part.
He's invited me actually to come out and watch some
Yeah,
film.
he's really cool.
So I'm
He's-
hoping to do that.
Yeah, he now was fought in Iraq, Bosch. So we're not the only guys who do this stuff, Ace and I. So you have to keep it somewhat modern.
Right.
Although in Michael's books, to his credit, Harry's getting on.
Well,
in
he's
years.
retired.
Yeah, and he's working for San Bernardino or
Fernando.
yeah, some smaller police department, because he's got a pension and benefits that they don't have to pay. So, which is a point.
His
in
new
this book.
character's great too. Have you read her?
Yes,
Renee
I did.
Ballard.
I read The Late Show.
Yeah.
I like. What's funny is I read Michael's early books, and then same thing, long running series. I kind of fell by the. For me,
Sure.
I fell by the. And then his last 5 books, it's like, wow,
Dynamite.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think he's you see him now. He's all excited. I've seen him a lot lately, and he's all happy and invigorated, and he loves the series, and that's great to see.
Well, it's interesting because not to talk about Michael Connolly all night.
Why
but,
not? Yeah.
Why not?
You
Everybody
know
does.
what? I'll tell you. All you have to know about Michael Connolly. We were supposed to do this store a day apart, and he called me up and he said, "Why don't we do it together? You come, you interview me, and we'll do." I sold a lot of books that day because people felt sorry for me. Michael had a line out there.
No, he's just such a solid guy.
Yeah, he really is. All right, enough about him.
But what he was saying though was about the Bosch thing. I guess they've been going back and dipping into various books instead of going book to book through the series.
Right.
He's like, yeah, it's really surreal because I guess right now they're working partly on this book that came out last year.
Right.
And he
I
was-
think they're introducing that character,
Yeah.
the female character, into the. Yeah, I mean, it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Let's talk about Mo for a minute.
Sure.
Is that done forever?
I think now Mo's books. I had nothing more to say through Mo in a book.
Yeah.
Right. You know, he's 65 years old, and the only thing.
He's just getting started.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm getting close to that. So, you know, as Mo said in The Hollow Girl, which is, by the way, I had a girl in the title a long time
Way
before
ahead of that.
everybody else did, and she was actually a girl, as opposed to a lot of these books with girl in the title are women who are fairly mature. So whatever. So in The Hollow Girl, Mo says the only thing I can flash with any credibility anymore is my ARP card. So you know, it's tough to have a hard-boiled detective who's a stomach cancer survivor. You know, really being a tough. And I wasn't going to send them to Boca Raton or Mesa. You know,
Mesa.
So. You know,
A lot of people would relate
no,
to
I look. I'm gonna wind up in one of those places. You know,
Yeah, the
my-
seizure world.
as Jim Bourne. You know Jim Bourne.
Sure.
Jim Bourne, who's used to be a Florida Department of Law Enforcement officer and an author, and he writes with this guy you may have heard of, James Patterson.
Who doesn't write?
Jim,
Patterson?
right? Well, so I'm waiting. So my brother, one of my brothers, whose birthday it is today, by the way, bought a house in Boca Raton, and I told Jim, and Jim said, "A Jew from Brooklyn buying a house in Boca Raton? What a shock!" So Mo, I wasn't going to do that to Mo. I wasn't going to have Mo buy a house in Boca Raton and live next to my
You
brother.
could go like a Charles Williford route, though. It'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just had nothing more to say through Mo. And so I do Mo short stories, though. One was nominated for a Seamus Award, which I lost
To
to who did? Oh, Bob Levins. Passed away. No, passed away.
So you can't talk crap about him.
No, Bob was a good guy.
Yeah,
He was a
he
good
came
guy.
here a couple
you know,
times.
yeah.
Nice guy.
No, so I can't complain about dead authors.
No,
Since I'm writing one of their books,
this is
Uh,
true.
no.
Which you got to tell your Larry Block story
Oh, okay.
every time.
Yeah, every time.
It's
Because it
great.
is great.
It is
It's
great.
So you guys know Larry Block, Lawrence Block, right? And he read my favorite Scudder books, and there's Philip Kerr, my other favorite private eye writer, other than Chandler. Who just passed away, by the way, Philip Kerr.
Yeah.
So the first book of these I wrote, I was at BEA, which is Book Expo America, and I'm walking with the ARC, the Advanced Reader's Copy of Blind Spot, which was the first one I wrote. I like blind in the comic that I was. And Lawrence Block, who's a very taciturn guy, calls me, "Hey Reed, how are you?" And he runs over to me, and he goes, "How do you like doing those books?" And I said, "To tell you the truth, Larry, they're fun, but I'm much more qualified to write Scudder." And he, without skipping a beat, goes like this. "Not yet." and he's made it pretty clear, no one will write his books. No, I could.
Yeah.
I could do Scudder. Yeah. But he's made it really pretty clear.
Ian Rankin was talking about how much of an early influence those Scudder books were.
Oh, they.
Mick Ballou was.
Right.
He turned him into kind of
The butcher.
a character.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I always say, if you want to know where Mo came from, read Scudder and Bernie Gunther.
Mm.
And and then I added what I added, and that was Mo. So.
Were you telling me once that Suffolk County at one time was a lot of Holocaust survivors?
No, not where I grew up in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn,
Sorry.
in Coney Island, Brighton Beach, Sheepshead Bay area. A lot of my friends, half of my friends growing up, were children of concentration camp survivors. Yeah, and that was a big influence on my view of the world. It was
Said there were a lot of numbers.
a lot of numbers on my friends' parents' arms. my friend Eddie, who's like my oldest friend, who still lives in the old neighborhood, his father survived 7 work camps and concentration camps, and, which means they moved him and tried to kill him by walking him from place to place. But as is the case often with camp survivors, the parents who survive inflict the damage on their children that was inflicted on them. So that's why one of the themes in all my Mo books was that, and in all my books, is that violent crime reverberates into the future, so that the what happens now doesn't end now, so that the line I wrote in the book Empty Ever After, the Mo book, is there are victims of the Holocaust yet to be born. So because I dated a woman who was the child of camp survivors, and it's just, and I think violence and inhumanity does very bad things to people, and there's a price to pay, and that they're not the only people who pay it. We all pay it. So that's me on the soapbox again. Sorry.
Well, Gus, love Gus. Love those 2 books.
I do too, and we know we have a big Gus fan here because that's where we lived.
Yeah.
That's where he lived, and that's where I live. So I can no longer say I'm a Brooklynite. I'm a Long Islander. So Gus, I thought those books, that people write about Long Island and they don't write about working class Long Island. That's the genesis of those books.
Do you think they were just too mournful for the masses?
Oh, they sold through. They sold pretty well. It was a complicated situation with my publisher.
Sure.
That no one here, believe me, wants to hear about.
So you couldn't publish like Gus Mahoney, wink, wink, nudge,
I could,
nudge?
no, I think there's
We don't
I
know.
actually have a third Gus, 1/3 done.
Really?
That I think would be great, and I someday it's gonna get published one way or the other, even if I have to self-publish it.
Wow.
So, because Gus deserves that. And Peter Blauner, who was just here,
Yeah.
his book is based on the same police chief as
He mentioned that. Hadn't he?
yes.
Yeah.
You notice my name's on the acknowledgement
Yeah, I did.
page
Yeah.
of that book, because Peter, like nice authors, smart authors, ask each other am I stepping on your toes? And I said, Peter,
Now that you mention it, he did tell me that story.
yeah, go ahead. He took Jimmy Burke. He took Jimmy Burke and used him in a very different way than I did. But I think I was tired of books about Long Island only being about rich people, because most of the people on the island are not rich people. They can't conceive of the fact that Long Island's like 100 miles long.
If I could steal some of his thunder,
Go
in
ahead.
the review I did of the Gus Murphy book, he talks about a town called Bellport. Bellport is within a few blocks, 180 degrees different. It has a very New English type, rich type town off a South Country road. You just go up one of those roads until you literally cross the railroad tracks, and you are in North Bellport, which is probably one of the most poverty-stricken areas of Suffolk County, crime-ridden section of town. Spicy's Chicken, which I was talking to you about, is like
It's closed,
I know. I told you.
Yes.
I beat you to the
I
punch
figured.
on that one. And I got a good replacement for you too. But that's what blew me away about Reed's writing, because obviously I come from the area. I write for the newspaper that covers that area, and it was so obvious he was from Suffolk County, because he nailed both the South Country Road section of town and the very bad section.
Well, isn't that the funny thing about Long Island is on the South Shore, right? If you're south of Montauk, that's where the money is.
Near the water.
Near the water, right? You're on the bay and the ocean's just
Fire Island.
Fire Island. You're looking at Fire Island, and and that's where the good real, and then you go cross north of Montauk and things get a little shadier. On the North Shore, it's north of the Long Island Expressway is like the dividing line. So it's very odd, you know, and what people don't, you know, it's not the Great Gatsby. Long Island is not what, you know, Nelson DeMille wrote about.
That's
Plum
exactly what I was
Island,
going to say.
or
It's not Nelson
it's
DeMille.
not Nelson
Some more
DeMille's.
Grey Gardens.
No, I mean that's rich people too.
That's
the
the
Hamptons. That's the Hamptons. So most of the people who live on the island are, you know, middle class people.
Blue collar,
You know, blue collar.
high school education.
Yeah.
Have been there for a long time.
Oh no, some, like almost everybody I know on Long Island is from the Bronx, Brooklyn, or Queens.
Astoria,
Yeah, Queens. Right by where the Mets play. That's
which is both of our teams.
right. Yeah. So that's Long Island, but and that's what I was like, man, nobody ever writes about a place like this. And I'm not really interested in rich people. I'm really not. They're rich, right? I'm not saying that their feelings aren't as valid as my feeling. I'm not saying I don't hate rich people. I'm just not interested in rich people. And when you go to the Hamptons, it's rich people. Or the very North Shore of Long Island, or a place like Belport. It's
I thought you were one of those rich author guys.
oh yeah. That's why I'm in 5 cities in 5 days. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we've been rambling on.
The relationship between Jesse and Molly is interesting and complex. Do you see that progressing in any way from what it's been and what it is now?
Well, it will always progress, but it'll never be romantic. No, the tension needs to be there. The kind of curiosity with each other. But Molly strayed once in the early books that Bob wrote. Do you not know
She
this?
did?
Yeah, she did with a hitman named Crow.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So
Yes.
so
Oh my God.
she strayed once. He was an Apache, and he was part of the assault on Styles Island, where they tried to basically hold the whole island for ransom, and 2 cops were killed. The bridge was. See, this is something people forget about the early Jesse Stone books. The body counts are very high.
Which
They're
one was
very-
it?
I think not Trouble in I think it was Trouble in Paradise or Death in Paradise, one of those.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, this guy puts a crew together and they basically assault Styles Island, and there's lots of dead people by the end of the book, including 2 cops, and you know, people have complained about my books being too violent. I'm in the minor leagues compared to Bob, the early books.
And you know, I read yours first and then worked
Really?
my way backward, and that is one thing that glared out at me. The body count was
Right,
large.
incredibly high.
Yeah.
And the first book, by the way, in this book, this is not an original theme that I'm writing about, because in the very first book, Night Passage in 1998, Jesse's first case in Paradise is with white supremacist militiamen, and in fact, there's a murder in this book that harkens back to that very case. So, and then in the second book, there's like that attack on the second or third. There's the attack on Styles Island, and in the next one, there's a thrill-killing couple who just kill people randomly, including the woman Jesse's dating. So when people accuse me, I love the stuff I get accused of. Right? You're too violent, right? Oh well, okay. Go read the early books, or what's the other one that I'm always accused of? Like, oh yeah, how dare you take over the series? Like, who are you? I didn't. They came to me. It wasn't my idea. You know, for taking over the series. You get accused of all sorts of stuff. The bottom line is I'm not Robert B. Parker, so there will always be people who are unhappy.
Ace has that great story about
6 killed.
Yeah.
So should I tell them?
Sure.
So when Bob Parker died in January of 2010, they looked. They didn't want to interrupt. They always knew Bob had given his permission for other people to carry on this series. So they chose Ace Atkins to carry on the series, and the announcement came out like a little while after Bob's death. And then the next book that came out was Six Kill, and the fan reviews for that book were unbelievably cruel to Ace. Oh, you couldn't write your way out of a paper bag. You can't even sniff Bob Parker. You know, unbelievably and you know what? He didn't write the book, right? It was Parker wrote every word in that book. So, you know, you just can't worry about what people think about. And that was Ace's advice to me. First, don't go to the fan sites. He said, don't go to the fans. Of course, the first place I went.
So what's going on with the Michael Mann thing?
Gee, I
Is it
thought
okay
we were
to
gonna
talk
be
about
happy. Oh no, I mean the world knows that, you know, it was up in Times Square in lights when the deal was signed.
Oh,
So
really?
my name was up in Times Square, and my wife has. I won't put that picture on my phone, but my wife has that picture on her phone. So, so I'm writing the prequel novel to the movie Heat, and it's an interesting exercise in varying processes, because there's the Hollywood process and then there's my process, and a lot of time has been spent trying to make cohesiveness. So it's interesting working with Hollywood, and Michael Mann is one of the smartest people I ever met. And we
Is
get
there a lot
along.
of back and forth with him
Well, in spurts.
or his people?
In spurts. No, him. Michael's not the kind of guy who lets other people do stuff. He does stuff. It's his, you know, when he puts his name on it, he does a lot of the work.
How did that particular gig come your way?
Ransom. I held his puppy for no, my agent got it for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so does anybody else have any questions or comments? If not, I'm happy to sign some books.
Okay, let's
Let's
break
sign
up
some
and have you
books.
sign some book. Well,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much,
Thank
Reed,
you.
and congrats on the publication. Good stuff.